As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
So precisely 3rd of September 2024, the Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is submitted 4 tax reform bills to the National Assembly for consideration based on recommendation from the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reforms, which is led by our very own Mr. Taiwo Yedele to review the existing tax laws. The bills include the Nigerian Tax Bill 2024, which is actually aimed at providing a fiscal framework for taxation in the country, and the Tax Administration Bill, which seeks to offer a clear and concise legal framework for all taxes, reducing dispute. You would say that the tax reform bills, according to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, are meant to protect small companies from paying taxes and to put in place a system for addressing cases of tax avoidance and tax evasion. This bill has been regarded as to many people as being controversial and has met various stiff opposition from some Nigerians who insist the reforms are targeted against regions or maybe class. The federal government has regarded the bill as an economic stimulant. On the program today, the 5th December 2024, we will be addressing the topic, Nigeria's recent tax reform bills. And we're going to be taking a closer look at this bill. To do justice to this interesting topic, we have in the studio, it's a partner, the Head Tax Regulatory and People Services, KPMG Africa, my own boss, Mr. Adewale Ajayi. My name is Olufumilayo Olani, and we'd like to go on a break before we bring our guests into the studio. We'll go on a break and we'll be right back. Remember to call a friend to join the program. Good evening once again, and welcome to ICAN-ngr again.
The Skillup Artisans Program Super is an initiative of the federal government.
The aim of Super is to upskill Nigerian artisans for better employability. This we are carrying out by collecting the data of Nigeria artisans through massive registration, training, certification, and licensing for better job opportunities, both locally and internationally. Super will improve the quality of life of Nigeria artisans. It will improve the quality of work from Nigeria artisans, enhance work and professional ethics from Nigeria artisans, reduce dependency on foreign artisans, and increase foreign exchange through talent export.
Log on to super.itf.gov.ng to register now. Super, upskilling Nigeria artisans for super job.
You're welcome back to ICAN-ngr today, and it's interesting that we're discussing something that is quite controversial in the entire Nigeria. And I have in the studio Mr. Wale Ajayi, is the partner and head of the Tax Regulatory and People Services, KPMG, in Africa. Prior to his current role, he was the engagement partner on the remuneration advisory service project of the firm. His areas of expertise include compensation and benefits survey, design of incentive skills, remuneration framework design, personal income tax planning, planning and administration of pension and other retirement benefit schemes, and tax business advice for local and multinational companies on the implication of new legislation. He also had extensive audit experience before joining the tax practice. He has varied experience advising clients on Nigerian taxes and proactively providing them with proactive or practical advice on how to manage any potential impact on their Nigerian operations. Today, we have in person the man who likes to write, and he has published a lot of books and is in a reputable, I would say, reputable journals and newspapers on compensation and tax related matters. Let's make welcome Mr. Adewale Ajayi, FCA.
Thank you so much for me. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you so much. It's so great to have you, a whole partner, KPMG. We're so delighted to have you. And because this topic is very, you would say it's topical, it is something that both the young, the old, the illiterate, the literates are aware of in Nigeria. And I want to take the words of Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher. He said, at its best, man is the noblest of all animals, separated from law and justice is the worst. So if you look at what Aristotle has mentioned here, you see that there's a need for us as professional colleagues to equip ourselves with knowledge of what is going on around the society. So in my words, what are national laws in general, and what are the reasons for their periodical or occasional reviews?
Oh, thank you so much for me for that opening question. When you talk about national laws, you're talking about domestic laws. So you're talking about laws that are enacted by a country's, legislative body. Some people call it, in Nigeria, we call it the National Assembly. In the US, it's called the Congress. In the UK, it's called the Parliament, basically to regulate the internal affairs of that country. And so those laws can only be enforced within that territory of that country. Right. And then when you talk about it, covers so many topics. So you can have criminal law, you can have civil law, you can have tax law, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. You can have intellectual property law, you can have labor law. So it covers all sorts of laws. So, but in essence, they are domestic laws.
All right, thank you. I mean, that was short and really full of interesting words there.
Well, what's the second part of the question?
Yeah, so you've been able to talk about it, occasional reviews. So why do they require occasional reviews?
Oh, okay. Okay. When you look at laws generally, and because the society is dynamic, there is nothing that is static. So there's a need for governments, to review their laws. One thing, of course, is that number one, you might need to review it to mobilize revenue. You want to increase revenue. Number two, you may want to review it so that you can align with international standards, agreement and best practices. So, for example, in this proposed law in Nigeria, we have incorporated the OECD Pillar 2, BEPS Pillar 2 top-up tax into our law, right? So you can do that. You can also review your law because you want to be competitive, right? Then, of course, you can also review your law because there are changes in the economy, and then you need to incorporate that into your law. Of course, you can also review your law to ensure that you can plug any loophole within the existing law, right? So that you can actually avoid, evasion and tax avoidance. And of course, there's so many reasons why countries will review the law. Also include the need for you to promote equity, and fairness. So companies will review their laws for those reasons.
So that's fine. It's good that we have to change because the trends are changing. So we truly have to change the way we do things. But in a controversy, the instance we feel anger, we have already ceased striving for the truth and have begun striving for ourselves. I want you to run our viewers because we have international viewers, we have viewers all over globally. Run them through some of the reasons that would make the introduction or the review of national laws to generate controversy rather than celebration.
I think the first thing that we need to talk about is that when you review laws, the whole idea is to promote sustainable development in that country, right? But at the same time, we know that people generally don't like changes. Like we are satisfied with status quo. Anything that threatens the way things are done, people are going to resist it. So one reason that you get is fear of change. Nobody likes to change. That's one. Number two might be because of special interests. I mean, you've heard that in Nigeria. Special interests can relate to, when you have a law that benefits certain group of people or certain section of the country and they don't want to change it. So special interests can be a reason why people may contest the law. The other issue might be because they perceive that the burden of the law is going to be pretty high, and they don't want that, right? So they will object to it. And when you have lack of transparency, right, in the way the law itself is done, right, then people will reject it. And it's again when you have inadequate engagement, you can have consultation, but if people feel that the consultation is sufficient enough, they will resist. And of course, if they perceive that the law itself is so complex and difficult for them to understand, they would, resist that law. And of course, if it causes all sorts of administrative issues that they're not anticipating, they will resist. And I think the biggest issue might be unintended consequences. You can have a law to address certain issues, but then there are certain things that might happen that you might not have thought of. So those are the issues where you see citizens, rising up, right? And which is some of the reasons that we've seen that have happened to the reform tax, to the four laws that we proposed in Nigeria today. So.
Thank you. I just want to take from some of the things that you have mentioned here. People resist it because nobody really likes tax, which is coming to my next question. Nobody likes tax, but we are compelled to do it. They said it is the law and you have to abide by it. Apart from government or regulatory agencies, the word tax, regardless of the type, is hardly actually received or welcomed by anyone, not even individuals or corporate organizations, even government itself on the other side when they have to pay. Why is it so? Why the stigma and also the continuous outright rejection of tax?
Let me start by saying that it depends on the society. So it's not every society that receives taxes, right? It's when you go to developed countries, they're willing to pay taxes. But when you go to developed countries, they are willing, more than willing, because they can see the benefits. But when you come into a place like Nigeria, we're reluctant. And I will come to that, the reason is why they resist. But first and foremost, let's remember that, there's a popular quote that says, there are two things that are certain, right? Debt and taxes, right? So you got to pay your taxes for government to discharge its own. But when you come to why, especially in an economy like Nigeria or developing country, why people resist taxes, I think the issue is, number one, where they perceive that government cannot account for the money they've collected. So when there's poor accountability and there's transparency, right? We're collecting these every month, every year, and people can see, where the money is going to, right? That's one reason. So they will resist. The number two, of course, because especially in a place like Nigeria, where we have to provide our public services, you have to provide your own, you have to be responsible for your own healthcare, you have to be responsible for your own road, you have to provide your own water, you have to provide your electricity yourself. And then the question then is, look, what am I paying taxes for? So people will resist that. And of course, when people perceive that, the system itself is unfair, right? They will, they don't want to hear about taxes. And where they think, it's so complex. People just think the tax system is so complex. It's very difficult to understand. So they don't want to pay taxes. And there are some places, right, some religious bodies or some people that have some ideological reasons where they cannot pay taxes. I remember there's a sect in the United States, right, where they live, a secluded life, right? They don't see any reason why they must pay taxes to government, right? Because based on their religious belief, they don't owe government a cent, so they will not pay taxes. And maybe the biggest of them all in a place like this country is corruption. And people can, people are hearing stories in the newspaper, this person has stolen this much, has spent this much. And people are saying to themselves, look, I'm paying taxes, but somebody else is stealing the money. Why should I pay taxes? So that's the issues that you see in a place like Nigeria. And so you continue to see, people resist, except we improve on our governance.
You know, when you were saying it, what comes to my mind is I am my own local government. I provide my pipe-borne water. I tend
Yes.
to repair my roads when they're bad, especially the one that leads to the front of my house. You know, things like that. Or even
Yeah.
when I get into a ditch, when my car gets into a ditch, I have that palpitation that, hey, I'm going to fend for this, I'm going to do the repairs of this car. So yes, your points are very, very valid. And everyone has a right to speak about it. It's a social contract, like we all say. As
That's
we dig
correct.
further into the discussion of today, there's this atmosphere of certain about the health status of the Nigerian economy. In general terms, when I put into perspective how sick, so people say Nigeria is sick, or perhaps the Nigerian economy is sick, or it needs health check. You need to take care of it. What is your personal and your professional thoughts about this?
Okay. So let me put it this way. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to allow the audience that, to decide for themselves, the state of Nigerian economy. I'm going to give some statistics, and then the audience can then decide for themselves. So when you look at Nigeria today, right, it's funny, right, because inflation rate in this country is about 33, percent, 3.88%, which is about 34%, right? Tax to GDP ratio, it's just less than 11%. We're trying to aspire to 18%, right? You look at unemployment. Unemployment is okay at 4%, but of course we know why it is 4%, right? Because we've changed the parameters, for determining, what constitutes unemployment. You look at our debt to GDP ratio. It's about, it's close to about 62%. You look at our deficit to GDP, right? Deficit to GDP is about 6.7%. And 133 million Nigerians are said to be multidimensionally poor. Nigerians don't have access to healthcare. We don't have access to education. We don't have access to finance. There is no, inclusion in Nigeria. And then you then look at the fact, yes, Nigeria has a youthful population. You can say that. You look at the interest rate in Nigeria, it's extremely high. Currently, MPR is about 27.5%, right? You're seeing people emigrating from Nigeria to other countries. Nigeria has a huge population, but these guys are leaving Nigeria and going to Canada and going to the UK, right? Yes, you can say, well, in terms of foreign exchange reserves, Nigeria has about $40 billion in reserves. But then when you look at those issues that are spoken about, right? So the question is, right, is Nigeria, healthy, or is Nigerian sick? I said, based on the statistics I provided, our audience can make up their mind, and take a position on what the state of Nigerian health is.
All right, I like that. That is wisdom. Thank you, Wale, for training back at the audience. And I just want to acknowledge some of our audience here. We have Olabanji Daramala from Chevron Lekki. We have Sonny Abdulkarim streaming from Abuja. We have a lot of people. Dennis Okutu saying hello, good evening. Oladipupo Olushola, ACA. Fagbala Temitope Adeni say good evening to everyone. It is good to be here again this evening from the ancient city of Ibadan. Pete Remy Ezugo from Delta State said it's good to be here again. Jane Consult, IB John, Oladipupo Ajayolu Shola says good evening and streaming from Egbeda Akonwojo, Lagos. Shokumbi Babatunde from Ibadan. And then John Bunu from Abuja. Messi Adarugo from Mushin, Lagos. Adegoke Adediwura. Good evening all. Ahmed Jauro and Joseph Aronsiola. Abayomi Ayomide, thank you very much. Moshood Nuruddin Mohammed, Ali Godwin Joseph. I just want you to see all the people that you're throwing your questions at. They're saying hello. Abu Joseph, we see you. Ojelola Funsho David, thank you very much for streaming live. Lanre Daramola, Wanjade Theophilus, Omotayo Akin Adenekon, Rashid Kabir, Amaka Oranodu. Every one of you, we see you and we say, thank you very much for joining. Ouma, Ernest, Chiku, Nora, we see you. He said, I'm delighted to be part of today's topical discourse. It is really topical. And that takes me to my next question, Mr. Adewale Ajayi. This recent tax reform, they've been talking about how it has generated a lot of controversies. I also think so, because you see people from different regions saying, oh, it's tilted towards them, or this is opposing some benefits that they will get from government and from their state. So what if you can please help to just give us an overview of the 4 taxes involved and the summary of each and what they seek to achieve.
Okay, thank you so much, Fumi. Yes, like you said, there are 4 bills that are currently before the National Assembly, even though discussions on them have been suspended. Okay, so we have the National Tax Bill, which is the real one that is triggering all sorts of issues. That's the bill, that tries to consolidate all the income tax laws, all the tax frameworks in Nigeria into one, and of course, update them to reflect current realities. So that's the tax bill. Then, of course, you then have the Nigerian Tax Administration Bill. What that does really is to focus on administration of taxes in Nigeria. How do we, what is the best way of administering taxes in Nigeria? So that is not generating enough, a big controversy as such. And then, of course, you have the Nigerian Joint Tax Establishment Board that basically focuses on the Joint Tax Board. And then, of course, talk about the Tax Appeal Tribunal and the Tax Ombudsman, right, which is really a novelty in Nigeria. Other countries have always had a tax ombudsman, right? The whole idea is to try and check the abuse, of tax authority officials. And then I think the 4th one that you have is the administration bill. I don't know whether Nigerian Revenue Service bill, okay, which is a bill that establishes the Nigerian Revenue Service and gives it the power to administer all taxes in Nigeria. So when you look at those bills, unfortunately, the only one really that has triggered, the major controversy that we're seeing is the Nigerian tax bill, right? And the way I look at this is much ado about nothing, right? Because the only issue, there's so many provisions in that bill, but everyone is talking about the VAT provision, right? And people are not focusing on the other issues. I remember in the late 90s, there used to be a song, right, that we used to sing, one bad apple by the Osmond, right? It says, one bad apple don't spoil the old bunch. So what we've had there is a case of one bad apple, has spoiled the whole bunch. Everybody is commenting on it. And so we're throwing away the baby with the bathwater because we don't understand what the provision of that bill is. And unfortunately, right, in Nigeria, because we haven't done, and I think we could have avoided, where we are today if we've done extensive and adequate consultation. If you are changing the provision of the law that is as fundamental as to how states, will share revenue, local government will share revenue, we got to be very careful. We have got to spend time to ensure that we carry people along. You remember when we talked about why people resist changes in tax law, one of the things we spoke about is because of lack of adequate consultation or transparency. Now, when people do not understand, they will interpret it. Now, the way they've introduced it is not against South. But when you look at it, it's not a question of the North against South, right? Because we're talking about the way the VAT is distributed. If we've done a proper simulation, right, and we can see, okay, this is the VAT that will be collected that is collected under the current scheme. This is the VAT that will be collectible under the new scheme. Let people will see it, right? Now, by virtue of the fact that we've increased derivation to 60%, people are looking at that and saying, if you are increasing derivation to 60%, the North will lose out. But remember that it's actually an issue between states that have big economic activities. Kano, Kaduna will fall into that, right? And states that have population. So when you look at that, you find out that some states in the North will benefit and some will lose. Some states in the South will also benefit or lose. People will be able to see that it's not a case of the North being pitted against the South, but we don't have that data. When you want to take a decision, it has to be data-driven. That has to be provided, and there has to be extensive consultation. Now, the situation in which we find ourselves is that everybody is talking about it without actually knowing what the issues are. Oh, because my governor has said, no, we must oppose the bill. I must oppose the bill. Those guys in the South don't know what they're doing. But we've got to change that narrative. And I'm glad that, common sense has prevailed in the sense that we still need some time, to discuss, the bill, and then have a data-driven session where we can actually use proper data. Unfortunately, the data you can use is not available to the FRS now, all right, because FRS doesn't collect data based on consumption in each state, right? And that's a problem. So I don't know how we can overcome it. If you ask me, my take would be, look, let's take away the VAT issue out of the bill. Let's focus on the other provisions. If you recall, right, when we're trying to pass the Petroleum Industry Act, right, there was also an uproar about the amount that is dedicated to the petroleum host community. We said petroleum host community will take 3%. Then we then said the National Frontier Fund, right? And the Nigerians have defined Frontier Fund is not, which again is a misconception. We'll take 30% of profit oil. And the guys in the Niger Delta are saying, how can we that produce oil take 3%? But it's 3% of expenditure. Why the guys in Frontier Fund will take 30%? But what they've forgotten is that, expenses are always guaranteed. You cannot have profit without having expenses, but it's possible for you not to have profit. So when they're confronted with data, everybody understands, and that's how we're able to pass the law. So it's the same thing I will advocate in this particular manner. Common sense will prevail, but we just need to provide, data that would support it and let people see that it's not against North against South, but what's going to be is a case of every country, every state, every local government needs to develop, its area so that it can stimulate economic activities, and then you get more.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Ajayi. So there's a particular person that has been throwing the same question that you just answered now. Matthew King's Academy said, is it true that a new tax reform will reduce the grant of northern state? Perhaps someone else has also, you've answered it, you've given some brief on it, but there's an Olusi Sanusi that was trying to speak, he's speaking positively about Nigeria. He said, Nigeria is healthy. It's not Nigeria that is unhealthy. It is an individual opinion. So I just needed to throw it out that Nigeria is really feeling fine. Perhaps some people just think that way. So thank you. I mean, we've been having an interesting conversation here. And if you are not on the program, you're totally wrong, because today we're discussing the Nigerian recent tax reform bills, and we're taking a closer look. And we are using the binoculars to see if it is right or it is wrong, or what are the things that we need to do so everyone can accept it. And today we have in the studio partner, Head Tax Regulatory and People Services, KPMG Africa, Mr. Adewale Ajayi, FCA. So, Mr. Ajayi, I would want to ask again, right, that as a partner and as the Head Tax Regulatory and People Services, KPMG Africa, are the controversies, or should I say the sentiments that the bills have generated, are they justified? But if you'd say yes, what will be that reason? What is the reason for thinking so? I want you to just give our global audience your professional, unbiased assessment of each of the four bills.
Okay. Well, it's unexpected. I mean, it's not surprising. All right, that the bills or the proposed reforms, have generated controversy and have generated engagement. That is what we want. We want people to become aware, of what is happening in the economy, and it's a way of also promoting education and creating awareness about tax. Right, it's been a long time that people have started talking about tax. That tax has taken the front burner when it comes to issues, so it's not surprising. Right now, when you then talk about my unbiased view, I think the issue we have again is a function of lack of adequate, engagement. There were engagements that were done, right? But they were not sufficient enough. That's one. Number two is that if you're going to take a decision that is as fundamental, again, I repeat, as sharing the revenue, because people have to understand, how did we get to where we are in the first place, right? When you look at VAT, it's a consumption tax and is meant to be, on a residual list for states. So states are meant to be legislating it. And because we don't want every state to come up with a consumption tax, right? We then say federal government will come up with a VAT law, which is what we're doing. But the way it is shared, some states feel shortchanged, right? That they're not collecting as much as they should be collecting. And so what did they do? They enacted their own consumption act, like Lagos State, like Rivers State, right? And they went to court and they won at the court of first instance, at the court of second instance, right? But we want to avoid that. Let's have one tax that, covers the field, which is VAT. And so the only solution to appease those states that are currently, upset about the way it is shared is to then change the formula, right? And what has changed is not different from the way our revenue is distributed today. So there is a derivation percentage in sharing oil. 13% of that goes to the oil producing communities or states, right? So what we're also saying in VAT is that, okay, let's give more, let's change the way we recognize derivation to where the consumption takes place, just the same way we're saying where the oil is produced. So let's give them, let's change that description, not to where the taxes are paid, but where consumption takes place. So it's the same principle, but the percentage is different. So when you're not given 60%, so that's what people are looking at and say 60% on derivation, then we're going to impoverish some of the states, in the north. So I think where we are today is because there is no adequate enlightenment and education. And I'm sure, and so that is why everybody is commenting, on the VAT. They're not even commenting on. There are even some fundamental issues in the bill that people are not even talking about, right? But let's stick with the VAT, right? So we just need, more education, more awareness. I think, at the end of the day, it's about providing data, right, that will show that, look, really and truly, this bill is not about North and South. Really, not really. It's about states that are rich, and there are states that are rich in the north, your Kano, your Kaduna, right, will benefit. About states that have big population, they will benefit. And what it does, consciously, is that those states that don't have big economic activities will then have to stimulate the economy by promoting all sort of, business incubation plans. So I won't say they're right or they're wrong in terms of generating this. What I would say is because of lack of education and lack of awareness is what has generated, the controversy that we're seeing. So as far as I'm concerned, it's much ado about nothing, and it can still be corrected.
Yes, when you keep talking about awareness, I know the committee would have said, they've engaged different sectors and different set of people within the Nigerian economy or within Nigeria.
Yeah, but the issue is because it's so fundamental to states. All right. So the question is, yes, they've engaged with consultants, they've engaged with accountants, they've engaged with so many people. So nobody is saying they've not engaged. The question is, how much engagement is this, especially with the political actors? Right? Don't forget that the governors are the ones saying this, and they're saying, look, you know what, we don't. I mean, there was an engagement with them, but how sufficient it is. If they've done the engagement and the governors still don't understand, so why are we in a hurry? Right? Because that is where it is coming from. So engagement, there can't be too much engagement, right? And when you engage, you need to provide data that will support what you're doing. I mean, unfortunately, there isn't that adequate data because we don't even have the data available, right? Because the NEC said, no, okay, no, we don't, the bill should be suspended. That means they're not satisfied with the level of engagement. Council of State, no, they're not satisfied. So members of the National Assembly says no, they're not satisfied. Governors Forum, some members of the Governors Forum say no. So the question then is, yes, there are engagement, but are the engagement sufficient, to generate the positive reaction that we want? So I think that is the key.
Yes, that's well said. When you look at the PIA, for example, it took so long for everyone to accept it, but eventually it was signed. It took almost forever, I would say. So, you are the knowledge coach, and expectedly, you're not moved by emotions or sentiment, because all that you've been saying here is the Wale that I've always known. You just say that as it is, no bias. Nigerian leaders have been battling, or I would say grappling with citizens on trust issues over the years. What is the confidence that the people should have in the Nigerian government to say, yes, this thing where you're pushing us to is something that would eventually favor us?
I think the way to look at it is that trust has to be earned, right? And unfortunately, when you look at the history of Nigeria, we've had leaders that have said, this is what we're going to do. But you find out what the leaders are basically saying is that do as I say, but don't do as I do, right? And so when people look at those things and they say to themselves, well, you know what? I don't believe what government is saying. And it's not only in Nigeria. People generally, the trust in government, right? Confidence level in government, even in the US, has fallen. We've seen the division, we've seen the polarization in the US. Everywhere in the world, trust in government has fallen. Right? But in Nigeria, it is worse because we don't even have anything to show for what we're paying for, right? So that trust has to be earned. And for that to be earned means we've got to be credible, right? In terms of what we say, right? We cannot say in Nigeria, for example, that, okay, we want people, because people are struggling, right? We want people to tighten their bets, right? And then we see our government spending on, things on things that they should not be spending money on, that will not generate economic activity. How can you imagine in states in Nigeria, out of 36 states and federal capital, there are only 2 states and the FCT that earn internal revenue that is at least 50% of their total revenue, right? Everybody depends on what comes from the center. And what did they spend the money on? On salaries. And if you're spending 90%, 60% of your salaries, there's nothing to spend to provide infrastructure, to provide public services to the citizens of that, to the people of that state. And so why would they want to pay taxes? Because for them is, look, you are pay taxes, even though not many people pay taxes. The few that pay taxes, right? They're saying I pay taxes, but I can't say anything, for it. And so governance has to be better across at the federal level, at the state level, right? People got to be credible. And if you say we've done something, it must be seen that we've done it, right? And that's the problem we have in Nigeria. People lack credibility. But like I've said, it's not only in Nigeria. Most trust level in government has generally fallen over the past years.
Okay, we hope that we regain that trust, or government to regain the trust with this new bill, because of course it's been passed by the Senate. So we're just waiting for the outcome of that. So we'd like to go on a break. I've been seeing a lot of comments, Wale. I mean, Mr. Jai, you need to see what people are dropping in here. Some are defending you, and some are saying, oh yeah, let's give it a try. Interesting. So we'd like to go on the break, and it's still ICAN-ngr. We'll be right back. Remember to call a friend to join the program, because it's really, really intriguing, is insightful, and you need to be part of it. We'll be right back after the break.
In today's interconnected world, complexity is the new normal. An accountant must navigate this landscape, leveraging interdisciplinary approaches to drive sustainable growth. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, USA District, invites you to our 12th ICAN USA International Accountant Conference. Join us for 4 days of inspiring keynotes, interactive sessions, and expert panel sessions. Date is 26th to 31st of August 2025. Theme: Navigating Complexity, Accountants as Catalyst for Interdisciplinary Solutions. Venue is Windham, Indianapolis Airport Hotel, 2544 Executive Drive, Indianapolis, IN 46241. Join the conversation. Shape the future.
The Skillup Artisans Program Super is an initiative of the federal government.
The aim of Super is to upskill Nigerian artisans for better employability. This we are carrying out by collecting the data of Nigeria artisans through massive registration, training, certification, and licensing for better job opportunities, both locally and internationally. Super will improve the quality of life of Nigeria artisans. It will improve the quality of work from Nigeria artisans, enhance work and professional ethics from Nigeria artisans, reduce dependency on foreign artisans, and increase foreign exchange through talent export.
Log on to super.itf.gov.ng to register now. Super, upskilling Nigeria artisans for super job.
Yes, we've been having some frank conversation concerning the topic, Nigeria's recent tax reform bills. A closer look with the partner, Head Tax and Regulatory People Services of KPMG Africa, Mr. Adewale Ajayi. Welcome back, Wale.
Thank you.
All right. So, I mean, I've been seeing a lot of comments around all that we've been talking about. I've been seeing a lot of comments on what we can do to hold on and not push, or we should hold on and understand it better. But my question is, based on your experience as a knowledge coach, do you see a meeting point or a kind of convergence between those in favor of the tax reform bills and those against it?
I think let's be clear. It's not that people are against tax reforms. All right, that has to be made. Right, people are not against the all the bills that have been passed. People are the issue that has been triggered is only about one provision of the tax bill, which is on VAT, sharing of VAT. Right, so that's where the issue is. So people support the reform because we need to grow Nigeria. We need to mobilize revenue, and then of course we need to improve the welfare of people, right? So the way I look at it is this: if there is one issue that is causing so much consternation, right, in Nigeria, the best thing to do is to set that particular issue aside. So the way I would look at it is that the way let's take away the provision on the VAT allocation because we need time for engagement, but we must pass the bill, right? Let's take off that VAT allocation and focus on the other issues, right? And obviously, in every law, when you pass a law, there will always be some unintended consequences, and you make a provision to review 1 year down the line, and then that will give us sufficient time to have engaged and to we will have understood ourselves, would have known that look, this bill is what is right for Nigeria, right? So that's what I would say, right? I mean, it's that's the only way we can get over the problem in which we find ourselves. Otherwise, we will not move anywhere and will not pass a bill. Nigerians generally are not against tax reform. Okay, the issue we have is just limited to one issue: VAT allocation among states.
Thank you. Thank you for being so frank about that. And I know you are the professional here, and you have that international repute. KPMG is actually known to speak up when things like this are coming up, and how you protect the citizenry in itself. And I know you're passionate about Nigeria. That's why a lot of us are still here. We are not going to jackpot, not even many. Assuming the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, invite you to briefly speak to a joint session of this Federal Executive Council, the FEC, and his economic team and the Nigerian legislatures on the state of the Nigerian economy, please tell us what you're going to tell him. What are the points that you're going to include in your slides?
Interesting. Okay. I think the way I'm probably going to title the presentation is to talk about Nigerian economy, right? And probably say is shaky and uncertain. Okay. Then the areas I'm probably going to cover is I'm going to look at paint a picture of the macroeconomic economic indices that we have in Nigeria. We've spoken about our inflation rate, which is high. We're targeting 21.4. We're like 34%. Speak about the unemployment rate. Talked about the MPR rate. Just provide the rate and the multidimensional index. So just give a picture of the economic parameters, right? The next thing I probably want to talk about is look at the sectors, the various sectors in Nigeria, and talk about the performance. How have they fared, so that we know which area to focus on, right? And then I probably want to talk about the macroeconomic challenges that we face in Nigeria. I mean, one of the macroeconomic challenges we face in Nigeria is in terms of fiscal sustainability. And that is why we're talking about those reforms, right? Because we're not generating enough revenue and people still want dividends of democracy, right? So you got to strike a balance, right? So talk about that. Then talked about foreign reserves management, foreign exchange management issues, and talked about issues that also have to do with the monetary policy rate. So that will cover the macroeconomic issues. Then I might then talk about some structural issues that we face in Nigeria. We don't have infrastructure in Nigeria. Road network is extremely poor in Nigeria, right? There is no financial inclusion, in Nigeria, all right? And then how do you strengthen our institutions? The institutions in Nigeria are weak, right? It's as it's a function of whoever is the head of that institution. So how do you strengthen the institutions, to improve on service delivery, right? And then I can then go on and then talk about, some policy recommendations based on the macroeconomic challenges that we face and the structural issues in Nigeria, and then make recommendation as to what that needs to be done, right? And then, but at the end of the day, it's not just about making a presentation. I think the bane of Nigeria is that we have people that are quite intelligent, that are brilliant, and that produce all sorts of reports. Our problem has always been implementation, right? You can have the best reports, produced for you. If you implement badly, you'll be back, to where you were. So those are the issues, that I will cover. And I think most importantly also is to then have a mechanism, for monitoring and reviewing, once you've started the implementation, what you've said. So those are the areas, the topics I will cover in my presentation, to the president.
From all that you've said, I think I already have 53 slides of interesting things to tell the president. That's good enough, right?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, we know that the president will not have the bandwidth, the time, to go through 53 slides. So we're going to have an executive strategy, executive summary that probably focuses on 2 slides, where you want his attention to be focused on. And then we've got to find a way to put in all those things in those 2 slides.
Interesting. Thank you so much. So I have some questions from our audience here. I'm going to take the first from Shokumbi Babatunde. He says the Tax Reform Act of 2024, which call for reduction on tax on VAT or tax-free for SME and small business in Nigeria, thereby improve the GDP. Does the improvement of Nigerian GDP will it have a significant effect on the balance of trade or balance of payments?
Okay, I think the first thing I would like to talk about is why are we increasing VAT, right? So, and that particular question can be answered in isolation without looking at what we've also done with respect to income tax rates. We're increasing VAT, we're reducing income tax rates. At the end of the day, income tax rate will come down to about 25%, and VAT will go up to 15% by 2030. And it's simple, because every country in the world is focused on indirect tax because it's cheaper and it's easier to collect, right? All you're basically doing is appointing an agent that will collect the VAT on your behalf, unlike income tax where you need to chase people, to pay their taxes, right? So it's because of the cost of collection, and which is one of the cardinal principles of any tax, any good tax. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. So the two will have to be looked at together. Now, with respect to small businesses, right? So one of the things that we've done also is that we have said we've defined small business. We've increased that turnover rate from 25, to 50, right? And then we're saying that they also must have assets of 250. Right, which is very good, because at the end of the day, what you're also trying to do is to promote entrepreneurship, right? To promote, one business is to grow. But, at the end of the day is that we've got to find a way. For me, it goes beyond just reducing them, because those companies are not currently even paying taxes anyway. We've got to find a way, to give them incentives, right, to incorporate so that they become more formal. When you have a business that has become more formal, right, it's very easy to track them. That is the focus we should be doing. What kind of incentives should we give to small businesses, right, for them to formalize so that they become more visible, to the tax authorities, right? Now, increasing VAT, is not enough. Is not enough, to grow your GDP. There are so many factors, that are involved in growing your GDP. Right. And so it goes beyond just that. It's an aspect, because what you're trying to do might even backfire, because if you increase VAT and people are not consuming, don't forget, Nigerians are saying, let them breathe, and they don't even have money to consume. And if people are not spending money, then that means you're going to have problem, in your economy. And currently, when you look at the Purchasing Managers Index that, Stanbic Bank has just issued, right, there's contraction. Yes, it has improved from 49.46% in October to 49%, because that shows the level of economic activities, in the country, right? So there's so many factors that we need to get to do. Interest rate has to come down. When people cannot borrow money to finance operations, economic activities are going to fall. If people don't have money, yes, we're trying to reduce the impact on personal income tax so that people will have more disposable income, right? But there's so many factors that are involved. So you have to take everything, in totality before you can say that your GDP, will increase. But I mean, good enough. When you look at growth in our GDP by third quarter, I mean, we're growing at, about 4%, right? I mean, which is strange because you're asking yourself, if the economy is growing at 4%, so what is happening?
What are we doing right?
Yeah, what is the invisible hand that is driving that 4% growth? Because people can't feel that, I mean, economy is growing, but people are becoming more impoverished. And so there's a disconnect between the economy growing at 4% and
In fact, Wale, I have some comments here, Mr. Jai, on that particular one. One most anointed Sam, he said, "Good evening, sir. Attention must also be drawn on the increment on the rate of VAT to 10%. That is another 2.5% increase burden on common masses. Nigerians have had enough." But that's not it. Someone else is saying here, Olawale Olaluwoye, he says, "As good as the bill looks, the trust deficit in our government is making people skeptical. The government that told citizens that subsidy removal on both fuel and naira will be beneficial to the country, but it messed the whole economy badly, is very difficult to be believed. A man that was killed by a madman would run even at the sight of a roughly dressed mechanic." Interesting, that's everyone's perspective. People have their own perspective. But I would want to take Fagbala Temitope Adeni. He says, part of our own consultation as a professional group, we need to guest more senior professional colleague on this burning topical issue through this platform for robust conversation, my personal opinion. And that's why we have brought the head, tax and regulatory, and is a partner with KPMG Africa to talk about this for us. But Shola Kodri, he says, trust gap is a great issue. Nigerians feel more of painful aspect of reforms, PIA, subsidy removal, forex deregulation, etc., than the positive impact. Accepting these tax reforms will be a great deal. And Kasali Sulaiman Adeyemi says, what happened to the Nigerian Orientation Agency? Public enlightenment should be their focus. Then Ouma NS, I just want you to see the perspective of people. You can give in 1 minute or two response to what they feel, because they feel the same way. Ouma NS Chukuma, he says, sir, can you highlight the impact of the differential percentage ratios of state population and derivation of governors expediting development when finally it's passed into law? Maybe this is not the platform where this can be done. That's a lot of consultation that would happen. But I see Boniface Nkoro saying, why is it that there is no regular reconciliation by FRS on appointed tax agents who withhold but hardly remit? That's another matter for another day.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
think people are really, really interested in this law because it will affect the bottom line. VAT affects you and I because we're the consumers of this products and services. So how would you respond to these questions, perhaps in 1 minute or two?
I think the one common refrain in all the questions there, it boils down to what we've spoken about before, is the question of trust. The question is, Nigerians, do they have enough trust in their government, right, to believe what their government says? If government says they will do this, somebody spoke about the subsidy, talked about the PIA, you're going to reduce VAT. How am I sure that when you've done all these reforms, right, that we'll see the evidence of how the money is spent? We'll see that transparency. We'll see judicious use of the money, right? That's the problem. Until we can address that trust deficit, I'm afraid it's going to be very tough, right? It's just going to be business as usual, which is what Nigerians are doing. Look, okay, government is doing its own. Me too, I'm doing my own, right? So we need to find a way to address that trust, index, that Nigerians have in their government. Otherwise, it's going to really be tough.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So I see someone else, and I would particularly want to read this. Michael Kende Oladega. He says the tax reforms bill portrays holistic and sweeping realignment of our fiscal and tax policies with present day realities. That's from Pastor Kende Oladega FC. That's his own opinion of it. And then we have Raim Kamoruddin. He says, good evening. My question is, how can some of the goods produced in the village be subjected to VAT, like Gary, etc.?
Food is already exempt from VAT anyway.
I know, right? They're basic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much. So, Mr. Jai, I have one interesting question, because I know that this is really important for accountants. ICAN is always open to ideas that would positively advance the growth of its members, the accountancy profession, and the global business environment. What is your suggestion, or what would you advise on how we can fill in the knowledge gap to further build the needed intellectual capacity of our members and all the professionals that we have here?
Well, I think ICAN, is already doing a lot. I must say that I must commend ICAN for all the things that they're doing. I mean, when you talk about knowledge gap, you're talking about things that ICAN has been doing, like the continuing professional development, right? So, I mean, creating a networking platform, where people can come together, using expert guest, arrangement like what we have here, where we're sharing knowledge, where, sharing ideas, right? So, and of course, also collaborating, with other professional bodies, or maybe also collaborating with academic institutions. Some things that there's some other things that I think we can do, and I don't know whether this has been done, but I don't think I'm aware of that. It's about mentorship programs, right? Right, where how do we pair people that are experienced, right, with people that are less experienced, so that they can actually brainstorm on a whole lot of issues, because we need to be able to develop the next generation of leaders and innovators. So mentorship will really help us in this regard. And I think the other thing that I would like to think about is about, right, when we talked about certification, right, and accreditation, can we offer, there's certain areas in finance, in accounting, that ICAN can then say, okay, fine, in these areas we want to offer certification program, so that it can showcase the expertise and the skill and the knowledge, of the people that we have. And I think the most important thing for me would be, how do we incorporate some sort of feedback mechanisms, right, to even understand where do we have deficiency in knowledge, right? And we can then, focus on those areas. We can tailor all our programs, to that. And I would like to see I can do more of industrial research, right? Where you can look at, take any sector of the economy, obtain data, do trend, not about writing articles, something that can help government to formulate policies. I think I need to see, I can do that more. So I would say, yes, we're doing well with the CPD and networking platform, creating online platform like we have here. But I think we need to do a bit of mentorship, do some bit of research, and of course, have a feedback mechanisms that we can use to identify, where we have knowledge gaps, and then see how we can address those knowledge gaps.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wale Ajayi. So perhaps I can respond to, it's not in my place to do so, but because we've been having some consultation in-house, I know that there's a mentorship scheme for young accountants, but I know that you may be talking about the old accountant too. So yes, we'll take that in good stride, and then we'll work towards it. And also the feedback. I know we have Uncle Willie. There's a platform. We also do AI in ICAN. So there's Uncle Willie that you can chat with anytime on any question that you have, and you will get an immediate response. Well, thank you so much. You have been very knowledgeable on this topic, and we enjoyed every bit of the engagement on ICAN on Air today. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Wale Ajayi. We say next time we call you, we hope you'll be there for us. Thank you.
Definitely. I cannot imagine that 1 hour has just flown by. I'm just getting ready. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. Thank you. Have a good evening, sir.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye. Okay, thank you everyone for joining the program. We'll have a couple of announcements to make. I want to say it again. Congratulations to all the 1,700 professional colleagues that's got inducted in the last 2 days. Yesterday was awesome at Amuwo in Lagos. We want to say congratulations to every one of you. We wish you the best of your career, and we pray that you'll use the certificate for something great in life. Thank you and congratulations. So the other announcement we have is the 24th Fellowship Conferment Ceremony, earlier scheduled for December 12th, 2024, has been postponed due to logistics reason. We apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your understanding. Please feel free to call this number 003-723-0392. 003-723-0392 for more information about the fellowship conferment. But I would assure you that in April 2024, the fellowship conferment, so you can register now as soon as possible, and you must belong to a district before you can have that fellowship conferment. Then the registration for March 25 to 26 ATS WA exams is open from the 5th of December and it closes 20th of March 2025. Please do so now. We have a couple of free webinars, everything that you need to equip yourself for the next career line or anything that you want to do. The African Congress of Accountants is here again from May 6 to May 9, 2025, as accountants from across the continent will gather in the vibrant city of Kigali, Rwanda for an unforgettable in-person experience. Please register now. We have the early bird registration that closes 31st of December. Don't miss this chance. Please register now. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining the program again. My name remains Fumi Olani. Remember to always follow us on our social media platforms so you can consistently see the programs coming up and even the new topics that would make your world a better place. So thank you so much, and we wish you a great evening. Do have yourself a great time. Thank you.